history of Halloween is pure evil. On this occasion, it was believed that a gathering of supernatural forces occurred as during no other period of the year. The eve and day of Samhain were characterized as a time when the barriers between the human and the supernatural worlds were broken. Otherworldly entities, such as the souls of the dead, were able to visit earthly inhabitants, and humans could take the opportunity to penetrate the domains of the gods and supernatural creatures. Fiery tributes and sacrifices of animals, crops, and human beings were made to appease supernatural powers who control the fertility of the land. Samhain acknowledged the entire spectrum of non-human forces that roamed the earth during the period. On this holiday, huge bonfires were set on hilltops to frighten away evil spirits. The souls of the dead were supposed to revisit their homes on this day, and the autumnal festival acquired sinister significance with ghosts and witches and hobgoblins, black cats, fairies, and demons of all kinds said to be roaming about. It was this time to placate the supernatural powers controlling the processes of nature. In addition, Halloween was thought to be the most favorable time for divinations concerning marriage, luck, health, and death. It was the only day on which the help of the devil was invoked for such purposes. History shows how true Christians did not practice the satanic tradition. Today's professed Christians should see just how they need to separate from such evils, especially if they are seeking to enter into heaven. The worldly customs and evil traditions are all vain and full of deceit, which will separate anyone from the God of heaven and earth who is partaking in it. Truly, the world is being spoiled through practicing Halloween, as billions around the world, which includes all these professed Christians, are partaking in this satanic tradition.
As ye have therefore received Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk ye in him, rooted and built up in him, and established in the faith as ye have been taught, abounding therein with thanksgiving. Beware, lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God.
As biblical Christians, we are commanded by our King to give no
Place to the devil.
We are also warned that
Ye cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. Ye cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the table of devils.
this holiday has everything to do with spiritualism. When we take a good look at what happens during Halloween, we can see how witches are real satanic worshippers of Satan. Their caricatures are portrayed and costumes are everywhere showing forth their evil fruits. There are coffins and tombstones, mummies, skeletons, and cemeteries, which are all signs of death. The mystery religion of Babylon has always loved death, which we can find clearly in the history of the mother of harlots, the Vatican. This mystery religion is all about death and murder and sacrificing innocent human lives as an offering to their dying god of death, Satan. Truly, the Church of Rome has shed more innocent blood than any other institution that has ever existed among mankind, will be questioned by no Protestant who has a competent knowledge of history. It is impossible to form a complete conception of the multitude of her victims, and it is quite certain that no powers of imagination can quite adequately realize their sufferings. Halloween has come a long way from its ancient beginnings as a harvest festival, from the ancient Celtics to the Romans to medieval Catholics to Catholic Irish immigrants traveling to America and bringing their Catholic traditions. Halloween, like all holidays, speaks volume about the society that celebrates it till this day. As the people observing Halloween evolve, so does this holiday. The magic that is found in Halloween lies in clear sight. As Christians, we are to have no connection to witchcraft, which God hates, and those who profess to love God and serve Him, who practice such things, are provoking God to anger, as they fornicate with the world and commit spiritual adultery against the God of heaven and earth, and thus they rebel. Truly, history is repeating herself.
And he caused his children to pass through the fire in the valley of the son of Hinnom. Also he observed times, and used enchantments, and used witchcraft, and dealt with the familiar spirit and with wizards. He wrought much evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee.
When we look deeper into Rome's history, we can see a clear connection with this pagan type stuff as Halloween, but we need to dig deeper. As many of us know, the Roman Catholic Church has always been involved with paganism and mixing it with Christianity, and Halloween is deeply rooted within paganism. It is interesting to note, they say, how often our church has availed herself of practices which were in common use among pagans. Thus, it is true, in a certain sense, that some Catholic rites and ceremonies are a reproduction of those pagan creeds. The Roman Catholic Church has always engaged in witchcraft, spiritualism, and the state of the dead, where they believe that the spirits of the dead visit this world, especially on Halloween. For instance, Lemuria or Lemures were spirits of the dead who returned for only 3 particular days a year to threaten their descendants. In order to win over the evil spirits, a ritual was enacted by the pater familias, which is the oldest living male in the household. When the clock would strike midnight, the pater familias would walk barefoot throughout his own house to rid the evil spirits of the dead. With this exorcism ritual, holding his hand upheld in what is referred to as a fig gesture, placing the thumb between the second and the third fingers, and filling his mouth with dried black beans, he would make the circuit around his house, spitting the beans on the floor in order to bait the evil spirits of the dead. And so, as he walked and spit out a bean, he would recite 9 times the incantation, "With these I redeem myself and mine." And so, when Lemures came out to eat the beans, the rest of the household, following along but forbidden to look behind them, would clash bronze together like cymbals and proclaim, "Ghosts of my fathers and ancestors, be gone!" The Lemuria was practiced on May 9th, 11th, and the 13th. Even days were seen as unlucky to them. And so, how did the Lemuria affect Halloween? In a historical facts check, on All Saints' Day, the Catholic holiday was adopted on May 13th, and there is good reason for this. Originally, the Lemuria concluded on May 13th, and on that same day, in 609 AD, the Church held a feast in dedication to Saint Mary and the Martyrs, the celebration of the dead. This became the establishment of All Saints' Day. How does this relate to Halloween? Here's how. Later, around the 8th century AD, as the Lemuria faded away in popularity and practice, the Church moved All Saints' Day from the 13th to November 1st, where it is currently celebrated to this day by Catholics. It was originally known as All Hallows, meaning All the Holy Ones, or All Saints' Day, and Halloween was simply All Hallows' Eve. Note that May 1st and November 1st are exactly 6 months apart and mark the beginning of the end of summer. When we look at the culture of the Celts, the people who were living in Ireland, and one of their principal festivals for their culture was under the name of Samhain, which is the end of the harvest season for the Celts. It was their new year. As the harvest ended, the Celts tended to gather up all their crops and livestock and have one large feast as they headed into winter. This final harvest falls on October 31st, which is Halloween. However, there was some uninvited guests coming to dinner, the spirits of the dead. On this day, the Celts believed that those who died during this year returned, so the festival of Samhain was a way to help the dead on their journey to the other world. Because this particular day, the Celts believed the dead were more likely to mingle with the living, so a place was set for the dead at their feast in order to honor them. This also meant that Samhain, with all the dead returning to visit, was a time for clearer omens and prophecy. Now, how did the Romans adopt Pomona and Samhain? When Julius Caesar conquered Gaul and the Celts, the Romans became exposed to the rites of Samhain and ascribed them to their own goddess. Pomona was the goddess of orchards and abundance. She was associated with apples, nuts, and grapes. The Romans associated the apple with love and fertility, and we have lots of rituals associated with Samhain, and so the Romans adopted these practices and thus mixed Christianity with paganism. Roman harvest festivals would bring in the apples, cornstalks, and pumpkins, and ancient Roman ceremonies honoring false gods involved trying to grasp floating fruits without using hands, which is where bobbing for apples came from, and the Druids believed that the black cats, which were reincarnated humans, would have been punished for their evil deeds, and thus became these black cats. These cats were then sacred sacrifices to them. Today, black cats are still sacrificed during occultic rituals along with human beings. Halloween is thus regarded as the witches' Sabbath, the equivalent of their New Year's Eve, where they would do their sacrifices. The Druids had many ways of sacrificing humans, one of which was packing them in a giant burning effigy of a man. Burning Man.
The crown must die! 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 The crown
These roots lie firmly in the old pagan holiday of Samhain, which, along with May 1st, Beltan, was regarded as one of the most important days of the year. On Samhain, it was believed that the veil lifted between the worlds of the living and the dead, allowing spirits, demons, and other mythical creatures such as fairies a chance to walk among us. But the reality of Halloween through the eyes of the Celts and the Druids is scarier than any horror film, because it is reality. According to old documents, in its most primitive guise, Samhain would have featured many sacrifices to the Celtic gods of death, with both animals and humans thrown into a huge fire pit as offerings. This tradition goes way back in ancient times, where the God of heaven and earth had even warned his people.
And thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire to Molech, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord.
Documents show that the ancient Druids ate their firstborn children on Samhain, or collected the blood of their sacrificial humans in cauldrons and drank it. Just like today, with what we see in the world going on behind closed doors, how there are many missing people throughout the year, where they go around harvesting children and people for the sole purpose of sacrificing them to their gods on Halloween. The stories get gorier, as we see on Halloween how people go around carving out pumpkins. Those that truly get involved in past times would fill their pumpkins with the fat from previous sacrifices and lit. The Roman Julius Caesar, who claimed to be a god like the office of the Pope does today, who took the place of Caesar, had stated that in time past of danger, quote, "Unless the life of a man be offered, the mind of immortal gods will not favor them." Now that we know the meaning and the tradition behind Halloween, do you really think that we as Christians are to celebrate this thing called Halloween and depart from the living God to serve the God of death? It is much more than just an innocent child's day. There is absolutely no way you can include Jesus Christ in these celebrations, and his children are to have no part with the spirits of devils. In Ephesians 5:11, Jesus tells us through Paul,
And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them.
if you are truly born again, act like it and obey the God of heaven and earth, and depart from the God of this world, Satan. Furthermore, in today's society, as kids are dressing up like witches and ghosts and goblins, and thus looking so demonic, the occultic members do pray for evil spirits to inhabit the costumes sold to the children. Just like the wicked and evil movies they watch, those demons are permitted to enter into the homes of those who do corrupt their lives with such movies. Instead, we should be praying that Satan would be bound. And yes, Disney contributes heavily to the occultic ideas with bed knobs and broomsticks, fantasy, fairy tales, magic spells, and witches. Aladdin with his magic flying carpet, Lion King with the circle of life, the mystical portrayal of the spirits of the dead lion, guided his cub, witchcraft, and practice of divinations. Pocahontas portrays the Native American mystical and pagan view of Mother Earth as a spiritual being, rocks, trees, and birds, etc., who have spirits as well as outer body experience. And sweeping the nations is the Harry Potter craze, which none of us should be engaging in such things, and it is no wonder why so many Christian lives are constantly being attacked by demons who have filled their homes due to the fact that they have allowed them to enter therein. Hollywood, which is run by Chris Dodd, who is a Roman Catholic, clearly glamorizes and participates in horoscopes, stars, charting, channelings, witchcrafts, mummies, etc. Hollywood television clearly proves how demonic and satanic the influence is that is streaming from this Catholic-run institution. It is time that everybody wake up and see the reality behind all these things. And so, as Christians, we are to have no part in things like this.
For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived.